Sweet in the morning, oh Lord, it's sweet in the morning. Sweet in the morning. This is an interview with Ms. Hattie Felder for the Birmingham Civil Rights Institute's Oral History Project. I'm Dr. Horace Huntley. We're at Miles College. Today is June 2nd, 1995. Thank you, Ms. Felder, for coming out and sitting with us today. We certainly do appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule.
You're welcome.
I'd just like to start by just asking sort of some general questions. Where were your parents from?
They were born in Alabama, of course, in Dallas County.
Dallas County, Alabama.
Yes. Yeah.
Both of them were born in Dallas County?
Both of them were born in Dallas County.
Were you born in Dallas County as well?
Yes, I was.
Okay. How many brothers and sisters did you have, and where did you fall within that group?
It is 11 brothers and sisters, and there was 5 older than me and 5 younger than me.
Oh, so you sat right in the middle.
Right in the center, yeah.
Tell me a little about your parents, education, first of all. I know in that day, our grandparents and stuff didn't get a lot of education, but just tell us just a little bit.
That's right. My father didn't get a lot of education. Of course, he was a very smart person, so he educated himself a lot. And my mother was educated very well for those days. In fact, her mother lived with white people back in those days when she was born. And it was her adopted mother, of course. And she had a very good life. She went to school.
You said this was her adopted mother?
Her adopted mother, yes. She adopted her from a baby.
Oh, okay. How much formal education did she have? Do you know?
I don't really remember, but I do remember her assisting in teaching whenever the teacher was absent.
So
back in those days.
So she was probably better educated than most others.
Than most of, yes, the people in that area.
Okay.
And she also helped my father. My father was with us a lot in our studies at night. She would be the teacher.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
What were their occupations? Was your mother actually a teaching assistant? Does she teach? What kind of work did she do?
She was just a housewife, farmer.
Okay.
Former housewife.
All right. And your father?
Was a farmer.
He was a farmer.
Yes.
Did you own your own land?
Yes, my father was a veteran of World War I, and he bought the property with our family, paid for it.
Okay. So you lived, then did you live in the rural section of Dallas County?
Yes, in Orville, Orrville, Alabama.
Okay. Can you describe what the community of Orville was like?
Yes and no. We lived across the road from one white family who owned a store, Berry and Son.
Berry and Son?
Berry and Son. And they were the only white people within miles to us. We had relatives. My father's brother lived next to us. They bought their places joining. And that brother also had a lot of children who was right along with us in age. So we had churches in the neighborhood and walking distance. Of course, back in those days, you could walk miles to church and to school. And every Sunday we were in church. one of those churches.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Now, this one white family, they own the store, and this is where you did all of your shopping?
Oh, no. Was just a neighborhood store. My parents always shopped in Selma,
Okay.
in the city of Selma.
Your parents then owned your land. Were there sharecroppers in the area?
There was sharecroppers. Those white people that lived across the street from us, across the road, had sharecroppers on their place, on their plantation.
I see. So they had a pretty large area.
Yes.
Okay. Tell me a little about the recreation during that time. What did you all do to?
We had something going all the time. We had a softball within our family because my daddy always played with us. And he would always see that there was no cheating from either side. He played whatever we played. And we were playing something all the time. We worked very hard, but then we also played very hard with each other.
So did all of the children then work on the farm?
Yes, we did.
Okay. What did you do?
I've done some everything. I've even plowed a mule.
Is that right?
That's right.
So you could actually handle the farm if you had to.
It's been a long time, but once upon a time I could have. Well, now I'm too old anyway, but once upon a time I could have.
Yes. How would you describe your school, your high school, for instance?
Let me start with the elementary.
Okay, sure.
Our elementary teachers, most of the time, was also our Sunday school teachers. We grew up with teachers teaching us in school every day and also on Sundays. So we were all sort of like family people. The teachers back then were very concerned about all students. And this was with all families.
So what was the name of your elementary school?
Providence.
Providence Elementary School.
Our church name was the same thing. We were taught in a little building right out from our church.
Was it church affiliated?
No, it wasn't.
It's a public school.
Right. A little 2-room. That's
Okay.
right.
And then
With
you
two
left there
teachers,
and went on to.
I went to school in Molet Bend to junior high school. And of course, that's where I dropped out and came here because I was a mother at an early age. So back then, they didn't allow you to go to school with the other kids. I was determined to continue going to school.
So you left Orville and came
come
to
here.
Birmingham.
Right. To support a child and go back to school.
When you arrived in Birmingham, then did you have family here?
Yes, I did.
Okay.
I came to my mother's niece, one of her nieces. I came to live with them and to get a job to go to school. I had to put my age up. I went to the county home, Ketona home. I was supposed to have been 21. And I was always older looking than I was, and I put my age up and got a job. Back then, we didn't have Social Security cards. And that came during the period while I was working out there. So I had to leave, of course.
Is that where you first worked at
That
Ketona?
was the first job I had at Ketona. I worked there 3 years.
What did you do out there?
I worked in the kitchen department and serving the patients.
And did you go on the school at that time as well?
I went to school at night.
Where did you go to school?
Poro Beauty School down here. Okay, after finishing Poro, then I went back and got my GED years after that.
What year did you come to Birmingham?
In 1949.
1949. That is just prior to the Alabama Christian movement
That's right.
being organized.
That's right.
Were you involved at all with the Naacp at that
Yes,
time?
I was a card holder, and I had gone to some of the meetings. Not a lot, but I had gone to some of the meetings, and I was a card holder at that time.
What was it like to be a member of the Naacp in Alabama in the 1950s?
Just about like anything else, you had to believe in what you were doing. You had to believe in whatever come up that was going to help us in any way. When I say us, I mean our race.
At that time, the Naacp, one of their issues was that of voting.
That's right. That's right.
Were you a registered voter?
At that time, they had this system where if you had children out of wedlock, they asked you all kind of crazy questions to keep you from voting. So we had to study those questions, and we had to know who was the governor, who all kind of things, who was the president and all of his cabinet and the governor's cabinet. We had to learn all those things to vote.
Did you pass the first time you went?
I passed the first time because I was one of those people that had to be sure. So I passed the first time, but of course it was after the movement had come
Okay.
into Alabama Christian movement.
Right. Well, in 1956, the state of Alabama outlaws the
That's right.
operation of the NAACP,
That's right.
and the Alabama Christian movement
That's
is
right.
established.
That's right. Then that's when I passed the voters registration.
Right. Were you part of those first meetings when Fred
Yes.
Shuttlesworth and
Yes.
the movement?
Yes, I was. Yeah.
What do you remember about that period?
I remember the seriousness of those meetings, the prayer and the determination to change the whole system. I remember the determination of everybody that was involved to make things better for the coming generation.
One of the first issues that the movement dealt with was that of a lack of black policemen.
That's right.
And there was a lawsuit that was filed. And of course, we didn't get our first policeman for over 10 years
That's
after
right.
that.
That's right.
But there were other issues. Of course, the issue of the school system when Shuttlesworth attempts to have his children enrolled in Phillips High School. Do you remember that? What do you remember about
I remember that real well. By the way, Reverend Shuttlesworth taught school in Orville where I was reared. So, you know.
So you knew him
right.
prior to coming
Yes, yes. He taught some of my sisters and brothers.
I see. What role did you play in the Alabama Christian movement?
Well, to begin with, I would just go there. In fact, at our church, my sister was one of those who were teaching some of the members to pass all those questions I just got through talking about to vote. Okay, and I remember getting information and going back, to the church with those questions and answers.
So was that what precipitated your getting involved in the movement itself?
Yes, it did. That was some of it.
Did you attend the mass meetings on a regular basis?
Every time they had a mass meeting, I was there. Because by this time, I had started working as a beautician, and I was self-employed.
Okay.
And so those people that could not attend the meetings because they would have lost their jobs, I felt that it was my duty to come forward because nobody could find me.
So that independence is what allowed you the opportunity to do what you...
that was taught in us as children.
How would you describe the typical mass meeting?
Oh, it's indescribable. We had, it was like a revival. We had prayers, and they were sincere prayers. We had the old time moans, the old time hymns, and dedication.
Were there individuals who gave testimony about different
Oh yes.
incidences?
Oh
You
yes.
remember any?
I remember a Mrs. Jordan, I believe her name was, that was related to. She was related to the Hendricks brothers, and I'm sure you know about them. Everybody does, because they were all involved. A big family of them. And she could moan. She could moan like you have never heard a moan.
What do you mean moan?
Well, I'm not a big singer, but you would have to hear it to believe it. One day, maybe we'll have something like that all done over again, so the young people can see where we were coming from.
Mm-hmm. You mean when one of the deacons or someone would lead a tune, and then everyone would follow that call and response kind of.
That's right.
Yes.
And sometime doing a prayer, there would be a spirit within that person in the audience. That moan would come up out of their hearts. You could tell it was coming from the soul. That's right.
And that's what you remember about the.
That's right. That's right. That's right. One of those things that make you sleep real well when you go home at night.
So then these meetings, then they were sort of therapeutic for you.
That's right. That's right.
At this point, and I always have my class to try to look at things in the context of their own times.
Yes, yes.
Why were they so therapeutic? What was happening that this would make you feel so much better?
We had the faith to know. You see, we were taught faith and to believe in God. And we had the faith to know that somehow, some way, things are going to be better. And we had that feeling within us.
Do you remember Birmingham policemen being in the meetings?
Yes, all the time.
Why were they there?
They were there to find out what was going on, and all the time they had connection back to the somebody, Bull Connor, I guess, as to what was going on there. They wanted to find out if there was anything they could get there to put you in jail.
You mean they were in radio communications?
In radio communication back all the time. Sometimes you could actually hear it when it come on.
Right.
But of course, I think we converted one of them while he was there in the meeting.
Oh, is that right? Why did you think that?
Oh, he started witnessing.
Did he?
He actually started witnessing.
What did he? How do you mean? What did he say?
Oh, he had a both hand hollering, "Hold it, hold it."
Spirit hit him.
That's right. That's right. Those days it happened like that.
Yeah.
That's
Okay.
right.
I'd heard also that there were those times when the policeman would actually, when the plate is going around, they would put money in the plate.
Yes, yes. And there were times when we had sermons from different ministers from different churches. There were times they were actually involved. There were times we could see tears coming from their eyes. They had a job to do, and they were not all involved in doing the mean things. Some of them was really involved in, they had to do this for their job, of course.
Right.
But they didn't want to do it. We had some to testify to that effect.
That's all right. I've also made aware that there were those who were termed to be snitches that were black in the movement.
Yes, I'm sure that happens in everything. Of course, I can't put my finger on anybody that I know of.
So I would assume that if the policeman testifies, if he does something that is, positive as far as the movement is concerned, that information would get back as well.
Yes, and he naturally they wouldn't send him back, anymore.
Did you participate in any of the demonstrations?
Yes, I did. On Easter Sunday, and I believe that was in '63,
Right.
I went to jail for walking down the sidewalk. Wasn't doing anything. We were marching. And they just put us all in jail because we were marching.
How many of you were arrested at that?
Oh, it was a lot of us. I remember Reverend King Martin Luther King was already in jail, but his brother was involved in this.
This was the march where Reverend Smith, N.H. Smith, Reverend Porter,
That's right.
and A.D. King
That's right.
were arrested.
That's right.
Okay.
That's right.
And this is one of those famous pictures that were taken. Right?
That's right. That's right.
And you were a part of it. How long did you stay in jail?
I was in jail twice because actually I went to jail that time, and when they brought our case to trial, Judge Brown was trying the case at that time, and he fell dead up there trying a case. In other words, he had just sentenced a retarded man. And I guess it was so stressful on him, he just fell. And when he fell dead, then Bull Connor came running in the room, he's screaming, "Don't let the niggas get away, don't let the niggas get away, call Judge Conway." So they called Judge Conway, and Judge Conway just had us all sent back to jail until they could set another trial for us. So we went back to jail that night.
So this judge actually fell dead.
He was dead when he left out of there.
Mm.
It was the saddest thing I've ever seen in my life. I just wish it was one of those things that everybody could see how hate can kill you.
So you think it was the hate that
It was the hate
did
in
he
him.
exhibit hate during that day?
And it was so stressful to him that he actually fell over. That was a young lady seated behind me, and she was the first person to realize he was sick. And she stood up and screamed and pointed, "He's sick, he's sick." And so they all
Was
ran
this a black woman?
It was a black woman. She was one of those that was
were arrested.
that was in jail at the time I was there.
Okay.
I believe her name is Askew, her last name.
Margaret Askew?
I don't remember the first name right now.
Okay. You say you were in jail twice.
Yes.
What were the circumstances of the second time?
This was the second
was the
time. They
second
sent
time?
us back and to
Oh, I see.
rearrange the trial.
I see. Okay. But it was on the same issue.
Right,
That you
right,
were.
right.
Well, the day that you were arrested, how did they take you from the area that you were arrested to the jail? Was it in a paddy wagon?
In a paddy wagon. They had them all parked out there ready to take us. And they just filled up one right after the other.
Okay.
And without anybody, scuffling or anything like that. At that time, they carried us all to jail.
Right. Did others in your family participate?
Yes, I had a sister that was very much involved. She was involved before I was with the students at Miles.
Yes. With the students
Right.
at Miles. Okay. How did other members of your family react to your participation?
I have a very, very large family, and I don't recall anybody in my family disagreeing. They didn't all participate by a long shot, but I don't recall anybody disagreeing with what we did. We were just in a position where we could and not lose our jobs. So this is why we went.
Right. So what about your customers, though?
It was on Easter Sunday, and I chose to go down there that day knowing that I may go to jail, because after Easter week, as a beautician, your work is very slow. So I was working by appointments anyway. So I just didn't set up any appointments for the next week.
But there were no pressures on you from
No,
any of
I got more customers.
So
I
you
really
were
did.
truly independent.
I had more patrons after then than I'd had for a long time.
Now, you were also associated with the movement choir, is that correct?
That's right.
Can you tell me a little about that? How was that organized? And
I can tell you some things about that, but my sister could tell you a lot more because she was involved in organizing the choir. But I do know Reverend Shellsworth, as president of the Alabama Christian Movement, asked some of the audience to, or some people from the audience, if they would get the choir together, and they did.
what church were you a member of?
At that time, I was a member of 46th Street in East Birmingham.
Okay. Was your church involved, your pastor?
At that time, yes.
Did you have meetings there at 46th Street?
We had one, I believe, maybe one or two, but our church was small at the time.
Okay.
So we couldn't accommodate
Right. 'Cause
that crowd. It was a large crowd.
It's a large crowd.
Mm-hmm.
What benefits did you, your family, and community realize as a result of the movement?
One of the things I think, there were doors opened up that we had never been able to, places to go, things to do, jobs, and all that sort of thing for some of the younger people in our families have gotten very good jobs after that. And schooling.
So would you say then the movement was in fact a success?
Very much so. It could have been better, but I think this is because of the misunderstanding of what it was all about.
How do you mean misunderstand it?
Some of the young people believes that the world owes them something, and they don't realize that they have to work for what they get. They have to participate. They have to be aggressive themselves. And I think by our generation working so hard to give them all of the things, the material things that we gave them, they misunderstand. They don't know how hard it was for us to come by them.
Do you think that the movement was successful or a failure in that regard of passing this on to a younger generation?
I really feel that in some ways we sort of got off the mark. We didn't pass it on as well as we should have, believing that they would have understood. But they don't have enough information, I don't think, of what has happened years before in order to get the information they need.
So you believe that there's a need then for us in our generation to develop mechanism by which we can pass this information
That's
on.
right. That's right.
And
That's right.
and it'll be passed on from generation to generation.
That's
you think
right.
that in fact would have a more positive
I believe
impact?
it would help a whole lot.
Is there anything else you'd like to add that we've not dealt with that relates to the movement? Let me just ask you one question. If I ask you, what was the most vivid memory that you have of the movement during that time? What would you say?
That would be very hard to answer. But right now, since we were talking about jail, I remember there was a lady in this cell with me. We were all in one great big room with no mattresses on our beds. There were holes, round holes in those steel beds that we slept on with nothing but the clothes that we wore in jail. And there was a lady there. Her first name was Bessie. I remember that because I have a sister named Bessie, but I don't remember her last name. And this lady had asthma. And after we, in the night, this lady got very, very ill. And I had saved my call. You know, they would give you a chance to call out after you get in jail. So I had saved mine for emergency. And that night I called the movement, because I remembered where the movement was that night, to talk to Reverend Gardner, who was the vice president, to ask him to see if they could get this lady some help, because we didn't think she would live till morning. And that lady, while I was talking to Reverend Gardner, you know they were listening to me. So while I was talking to Reverend Gardner, they came up and got her and carried her to UAB. They gave her a shot, and a few hours later they brought her back. She was doing better. Now they told her, she came in and told us that they told her she could go home if she wanted to from the hospital. But she told them she didn't want to go home. She wanted to come back with the group that she had gone to jail for. She wanted to be free. She wanted to have the same rights and privilege of any other human being on this earth. And she came back to jail.
What you call that commitment?
The commitment, that was the kind of commitment we had back in those days.
Well, obviously the movement had to have been made of people who had that kind of commitment and dedication.
That's right.
Because without it, it would not have been a success.
That's right.
Yes. Right. Ms. Felder, I certainly appreciate your taking time out and coming and spending this time with us today. And we hope to sit down and talk with you again at some later date.
Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you very much.
Sweet in the morning, oh Lord, it's sweet.